Hello, my name is Victor. In this video, I would like to show you how to operate the laser cutter in SCM. Now, normally, you will need a technical staff to accompany you into the laser cutting room. Follow me. Once you enter this room, you would find two laser cutters. There's the bigger machine that will work with material with a width of 1.2 meters times 900 millimeters. And there is the smaller machine that will work with material from 900 millimeters to 600 millimeters. In general, keep this room clean. The laser cutter can process many different types of materials. For example, this is a piece of cardboard. This specific one is a gray type of cardboard where it's gray throughout its middle. There are many other types of cardboard that can be processed, from white card to laminated cards to black color cards and brown cards. They're all possible. This is a piece of plywood. This particular one is a 3-layer laminated plywood. It looks very nice on the surface, and if you do engraving, they look quite nice. This is a maybe not so nice piece of plywood. It's still possible to cut through them and engrave of them. And then we also have acrylic material. In this case, it's a transparent piece of acrylic. When you buy a piece of acrylic, usually it comes with a protective film on both sides. For example, in this case, you see the protective film still attached. It's important that you remove the top layer of the protective film, like this, before you put it on the laser cutter. Otherwise, there's a good chance of fire. For example, in this case, you would remove the top protective layer and keep the bottom one on. And that is because the bottom one can protect you from these dirt marks. Material comes in different thickness. For example, this piece of acrylic is pretty thick. It may be possible to be processed by the laser cutter. But for thicker materials, please consult the on-site technician first, because there's a chance that you cannot cut through them. There are also specialty types of acrylic. For example, this one has a mirror finish. For these special types, particularly mirror finish, it's possible to cut them through, but it has a different settings, and please consult the on-site technician. Look at this piece of material. This is very likely to be a polycarbonate board. It does look transparent, but it does not cut properly on the laser cutter. In fact, other types of plastics are also not possible. For example, PVC boards are not possible because they do generate toxic fumes. In general, for all the materials that I mentioned, like cardboard, plywood, and acrylic, material thickness from 1 to 4 millimeters would generally be possible. Thicker materials would require longer time to cut, and they would be trickier to focus. Now, when you select a piece of material, make sure that they remain flat on the machine. Sometimes when you buy the material from a shop, they're not kept very well, and they're not very flat. For example, in this case, you can see that when I put it on the machine, and I press gently in different corners, they remain rather flat. A counter example would be this piece of plywood. Notice that when I put it on the machine, this side and this side is not flat. The problem with this is that when the laser cutter is operating, the laser needs to focus on the top of the material surface. And if this is not flat, it would be out of focus in these locations. And that would substantially reduce the laser power, and that would not cut through properly. Or, if you're engraving, that would become a blurry image. In general, acrylic plates particularly are quite flat, so they have a very good chance of success. The technical staff would log in this computer for you, but afterwards it's on your own. You would then need to open Adobe Illustrator and log in to the Adobe Illustrator user account with your own user ID. That's the place where you put your own university email address into this. And then you would see the university login screen, and that would grant you access to Illustrator. Now open your own file. So for example, this is a file that I have prepared. One of the very important things of laser cutting is that you need to make sure the scale of what you have drawn is the same when you're going from another software that prepared this file into Illustrator. So what I usually do is I would draw a rectangle that would represent roughly the size of the material that I'm laser cutting. You can just simply measure it with a ruler, more or less the location. In this case, I have 30 centimeters times 7 centimeters. And in this case, I have drawn this rectangle to represent that. And I can check by selecting this rectangle and going to the Properties panel, the width and the height of the rectangle. If you happen to see the unit is not in millimeters, you can go into Edit, Preference, and Units. And make sure that you select millimeters in both this General and Strokes. Once you do that, you should be able to see the width and the height of your selected object here. So double check with what you have modeled and drawn, and make sure that all the actual shapes that you would like to laser cut or engrave to be within the material shape. Once you have done this checking, you do not need this rectangle anymore. Of course, you can choose to still keep it, but in general, you do not need to laser cut around that, and all you need is the objects inside. You can simply delete the rectangle on the outside. For objects that you would like to engrave, you will need to turn off the strokes. So for example, in this text, you can see that the stroke is set to transparent and there is no stroke thickness. There is only a fill color, which is not important. In this case, it's black. In these cases, these circles, which are vector graphics, where the strokes have been turned off, leaving only their fill color. This ensures that the laser cutter only engraves the surface of the material. If you have turned on stroke, it would also cut through these circles. So make sure that if you want to engrave only, turn off the strokes. And for the curves that I would cut through, for example, in this case, these are the curves that I would like to cut through, I would change the stroke, which you can change here, to 0.01 point. If you change that, they look very, very thin over here. And again, you check it by selecting them and make sure that stroke is 0.01 point. Typically, when you enter the room, the technician would turn on the laser cutter for you. And before you actually run the file, make sure that the other two machines are also turned on. The small machine on the ground is an air compressor that would help blow away the cut debris from where the laser is cutting. If it's not turned on by the technician, do turn it on from this switch. The second machine is air filtration system, which turns on from this button. Usually, I like to rest the material and push this material against the two ruler edges of the machine. That makes sure the material is 90 degrees to the machine. Now next, you will need to set the focus of the laser cutter head. You switch on the jogging mode by this button, and with the joystick, you can control the laser cutting head to move left, right, up, down, all along the material. You will want to move the laser to more or less the center of the material where it's flat. Now, of course, here I'm double checking whether my material is flat everywhere. And in the next step, the machine would go up, the material and the bed would go up and push against this part of the laser cutting head. It's super important to make sure that your material is flat on the top. Otherwise, the machine would not be able to hit this button and would keep going up and damage other parts of the machine. Then, with this autofocus button, the focus is set. Next, you can have the machine go back to the top left-hand corner by pressing this home button. And that's it. You can then close the machine and go back to the computer for the next step. From Adobe Illustrator, use the Print button by pressing File, Print. By default, the Epilogue Engraver is selected. You do not need to change anything here. And for scaling, make sure that it says Do Not Scale. This will ensure that you cut with the right size. Then press Print. Then you would see this interface with a live view of the printer and the material that you have placed in it. Now, if you do not see your artwork, try zoom out with the middle mouse button. And here you go. This is the graphics that we have drawn. It's simply placed outside of the area. All you have to do is to move it to where your material is, and you have a very direct visualization of where that would go on your material. As you can see, it's not necessarily to put them in a precise location in the Illustrator environment. Within this dialog, you can position this to a location you want. As we have set the outline to 0.01 point, the process here have successfully recognized the two types of processes that we want to do. First is the engraving, which includes the logo of SCM and the two dots. It's important to make sure that by clicking this import material setting, that the engrave tab is set to either 300 dpi or if it's really fine graphics, 500 dpi. It's going to take a little longer with this setting. So press import and it shows you a rough estimation of the time needed. In this case, 51 seconds. Next is for cutting through. It also recognizes the vector drawing, again with the 0.01 point outline. Here, again, import material setting. And here I would select the vector. And in this case, I have acrylic of 3 millimeters. Notice that for plywood, you would choose this one, for example, for a 3 millimeter plywood. For other types of settings that is not present here, consult the on-site technician. Because we have already done autofocus on the machine side at the center of the material, which is quite precise, we should turn this autofocus off here. Notice that the thickness setting here is not important. Please do not change that. Please select off for autofocus. It's an important reminder that if your material cannot be successfully cut through, do not attempt to change the thickness here. That only changes the focus point of the laser and in fact would even make things worse. If you cannot successfully cut your material, please consult your on-site technician. Next is to press the print button and we can go back to the machine side. Close the lid and you can select your file here. Press the file tab and making sure that your file has been selected. Then you can press the play button and it will start cutting. If you would like to pause, press this button again and it will be paused. If you would like to cancel the entire file, you can press this home button again and it will stop the entire file and you can load a new file and start again. Once the laser cutting is completed, the machine would make a beep sound and you can then open the lid of the machine. There's a small technique to make sure that in case you did not cut through and you need to recut it with a higher power, try to hold your material down very carefully such that you're not moving it and just slightly test whether this is movable or not. Notice that this tiny piece is movable, meaning that it is successfully cut through. Now, if they are not movable and you need to recut, let go very gently and there is a good chance that the machine can operate at exactly the same location and you do not ruin this piece of material. Here I have no problem. Basically, the final step is to clean up. Pick up your material and if very tiny pieces drop inside the machine, that is fine. Pick up all the pieces and for these acrylic materials, you can then peel off the back, which does take a bit of effort. This process could take some time. Please do it in your own workshop and leave this space for the next user. Make sure when you're done, pick up all the trash from the machine, close all the windows you have, sign out of Illustrator account, and of course, pick up all the pieces that you have cut. Don't forget about your USB drive. During the operation of the machine, make sure that you keep watching your material because there is some chance that the material can catch fire. This can happen because of many reasons, for example, the incompatibility of your material with the printer or simply a wrong focus setting. For example, right now the machine is in operation and the laser is operating. If there is an emergency, you can either press the pause button first or you can directly open this door. By opening the machine door, the laser will still be moving, but the laser will not be emitting. generally by opening this door and fresh air coming in, the fire will be put out by itself. If this still does not put out the fire, there's a water bucket at the entrance of the room with a wet towel. Make sure that this is wet, and you can simply cover up the location that is on fire. If the wet towel does not solve your problem completely and the machine is still on fire, do not panic. It won't burn down the building immediately. There is a fire extinguisher at the entrance of this room. What you can do is pull out this tab, aim the nozzle to where the fire is, and then press down the lever. That would activate the fire extinguisher, and of course that would also ruin everything inside the machine and maybe even the machine itself. So use this only as a last resort.